Welcome to another episode of Ones to Watch. In today's video, we are looking at the 5 teams I think you've got to keep your eye out for in the National League North. Again, I will reiterate, this is not in any way a predictions video as such. It is merely the 5 teams with situations I personally think are well worth keeping an eye on. And at number 5 in this particular video is a team that, at the 5th time of asking, have finally got themselves promoted into this division after a couple of playoff heartaches and a couple of seasons curtailed because of COVID, and that is, of course, South Shields. And one thing I'm finding really interesting about Shields coming into this season is that the fans seem to have lowered their overall expectations somewhat. I mean, I personally don't know what it is, because you think of it, since Jeff Thompson took over there, the fans' sort of first expectation was to get out of Northern League Division 2, then Division 1, then the Northern Premier League North Division, I believe it was at the time, then out of the Northern Premier League Premier Division. And I really would love to know exactly what the reason is behind sort of maybe lowering their expectations somewhat. Is it because it took them so long to get out of the Northern Premier League, and obviously this is going to be a very big step up for them, but as we know, they've got money and they ain't afraid to spend it, and I think they've, for the most part, they've kept the hold of the core of the squad that won the Northern Premier League relatively comfortably last season. Of course, Kevin Phillips has left the club and has been subsequently replaced by former Shields player, former Middlesbrough player, former Sunderland player Julio Arca. So what kind of an impact is he going to have on the team? And of course, they lost Jordan Hunter, who's been a key part of their promotion from the Northern Premier League. Obviously, he's gone to Gateshead, but they have brought in John Lafudu and Paul Blackett from Spennymoor Town, both players with a good range of experience at this level. I think they'll be good additions for them. I think by the sounds of it, Shields have been maybe crying out for a striker like Blackett. Obviously, we've seen him at Gateshead, we've seen what he can do at Spennymoor. I think he'll settle in just fine there, and I think Shields will do relatively okay this season. I think they'll be in and around the playoffs. Whether they actually get in them or not is going to be a different kettle of fish. It all just depends on how quickly the squad can adapt to the step up, who else is to come in, etc. But I think Shields are in for a relatively positive first season at National League North level. So, in at number 4 in this particular video, it is a team not that far away from South Shields at all geographically, and it is, of course, Spennymoor Town. Now, I think Spenny's recruitment so far this summer is really underrated. Like, I think, bearing in mind, obviously, last season they only just missed out on the playoffs. They were involved in all absolute chaos on the final day of the season, and there were many points on that final day where it was looking as though they maybe were going to sneak in at the 11th hour, but it wasn't to be in the end. But I think the recruitment so far just does make sense, really. Obviously, James Montgomery's come into them, so it's a really good, experienced goalkeeper there as well. You've got Will Harris, who I think, unfortunately, didn't quite work out for him at Gateshead, but there's most definitely a player in there that I can assure Spenny fans of that. He'll always give you everything he's got, and I think at National League North level he could really thrive. I think you look at his goal scoring records when he was in the Sunderland under-23 squad, that speaks for itself. And there were glimpses of what he can do at Gateshead. I think a lot of it was just ultimately down to his confidence, and as well, I believe brought in Ben Pollock. So again, another pretty good signing there for them. So do they have they done enough to potentially make that push on and claim a top 7 spot? I mean, only time will tell, but I think Jamie Chandler, obviously he's going in there as a manager now, like, he's doing a pretty good job in terms of the recruitment process. It'll be interesting to see who else they'll bring in, but one thing I will say this year is most definitely do not underestimate Spennymoor. So at number 3 is a team that are in the National League North but didn't really want to be in the National League North, and it is of course Bishop Stortford. Now there's been a lot of controversy surrounding this club over the last few weeks or so. They launched an appeal once they were allocated a place in the National League North by the FA. They're sort of putting arguments together that they couldn't really afford to be in the National League North, whereas the National League South maybe would have been a bit more friendly for their overall budget, and sort of trying to justify, I think it was Hemel Hempstead, that they were arguing a case that should have been put in the National League North, because it maybe turned out they would have had to travel maybe 10 less miles over the season, something like that. So it was unbelievably fine margins, and I think in terms of league allocations, given that it was 3 southern teams, 1 northern team went down from the National League, I think there's always going to be someone was going to end up disappointed with what they got, and ultimately it has proven to be Bishop Stortford. I mean, technically Braintree is a tiny bit further north, but I think they've maybe done it based on the fact that it is just easier for the teams in the National League North to get to Bishop Stortford than what it is to get to Braintree. Obviously, it's just off a main road and what have you. It's not that far from Stansted Airport. So I think they're gonna. I think, like, obviously they've, like, on social media over the last few weeks, it's been controversial. They've ended up blocking a lot of people that have maybe said their opinion or whatever. Maybe no need for them to sort of maybe carry on like that. Is social media, like, people are gonna pick up on things. You are gonna have memes made and what have you. That's just the way it is. But I think I saw someone, maybe one of their fans or maybe someone that personally knows one of the players, that said go and upset a few Northerners, and it'll be interesting to see if they can do just that. I think it's going to be a difficult year for them, but I'm interested to see how they adapt to the National League North. Obviously, just coming up from Step 3, a little bit like South Shields. So can they go out and upset the Northerners, or is it just going to be a bit too much for them over the course of the season? We'll soon find out. So at number 2 is a team that over the last couple of years or so have been definite dark horses within the National League North, and I personally can see that being the case again, and it is Alfreton Town. Now, of course, as I've just mentioned, over the last couple of years, they were maybe flirting with the playoffs a little bit in the 21-22 season. And of course, last season they actually managed to get in the playoffs, but were ultimately beaten in the eliminators by Kidderminster. But it seems as though they've maybe recruited pretty well so far this summer. They've maybe kept a hold of quite a bit of the core of the squad as well. So can they push on and be in the playoffs again? It is going to be really interesting to see. Of course, it's never an easy place to go. They make things like as awkward as possible for pretty much everyone that goes there. I mean, obviously, as a Gateshead fan, we've come unstuck against Alfreton plenty of times over the years, and I think once again they are going to be a very tough nut to crack. So I'm looking forward to seeing how they go about it this year. I mean, a lot of people don't particularly like Billy Heath's style of play, but it is maybe proven effective, and that is reflected in the league positions over the last couple of years or so. And I could potentially see them being in around the playoffs once again. And at number one, I'm sorry guys, I know it's a total cop-out answer, but Scunthorpe United and their recruitment and their return list pretty much speaks for itself. Like, you just look at it the other day, they managed to bring in Callum Roberts, a player that was obviously at Notts County for a couple of years, did very well at Notts County, then went up to Aberdeen and didn't quite work out for him there. Obviously, he was massively affected by injuries, but a player that is an unbelievable capture for Scunthorpe, especially considering there will have been various clubs in the National League and maybe even in League Two that were looking to capture his services. And you look at just their overall squad in general, like, there's many people saying that squad would do pretty well in the National League, let alone the National League North. So they will be overwhelming favourites to win the league this coming season, but they've got to be careful, in my opinion, because they can't go into this league thinking they're just going to absolutely walk it, win 46 out of 46, because that's just not going to be the case, I don't think. I think many teams are going to look at Scunthorpe and regard them as being the team to beat. They'll no doubt raise the game when it comes to it, but I do think overall, over the course of the season, Scunthorpe will just have a little bit too much for the rest of the league. Obviously, you've got to bear in mind they're a full-time team going into a league of predominantly part-time teams, but I do think they'll have a challenger or two, but I think maybe as the season's drawn to a close, they might start to pull away from those challenges somewhat. Obviously, think back to the 21-22 season, he had Brackley up there with Gateshead pretty much all year, but as it was getting towards the end, Gateshead just managed to pull away somewhat, and I think being full-time at that level can make a massive difference over the course of a season. I mean, when it comes to that league, I think there isn't a massive difference in terms of the quality between full-time teams and part-time teams, because I think what you've got to remember is it is essentially the best part-time players in the country against the worst full-time players. So that in a lot of games is something of a leveler, but I think over the course of a season, I think that extra fitness and what have you just does take its toll. I think you might find in the early days Scunthorpe might slip to a couple of surprising defeats here and there, maybe to a Rushall Olympic, or maybe to a Scarborough, or to Alfreton or Gloucester or someone like that. So it's not going to be as straightforward as people are making out, but it's going to be it's a big year ahead for Scunthorpe. As I said, the pressure is on them to get out of that league at the first attempt. Can they do it? So that is that for this video, and I'll be back tomorrow, and tomorrow we are covering the National League. So until then, take care, cheers for watching, we'll see you later.